AI has taken the world by storm in the last couple of years, and it's all people can talk about in the cryptocurrency market right now too. AI agents are the next evolution of AI and essentially create bots that can go off and do their own things. Last week, I posted a video where I launched an AI agent that I called Professor Fox with an AI agent launchpad called Virtuals. This week, we're going to dive into Virtuals and their GAME system where you can configure and improve your own AI agent. So in the next few minutes, you'll see how to use GAME or GAME by following along what I did for Professor Fox, our agent built to educate newcomers to crypto and Web3. So in the process, you'll learn how to do the same for your own agent. A quick note here is that this is a slightly more advanced topic, but newcomers should be able to follow along too. So as I say, this week's post and video is a continuation of last week's, so it's good to have a quick recap of what we covered. 2 weeks ago, we actually looked at AI agents, which have taken over mindshare in crypto, and looked at the Virtuals ecosystem, along with big agents there like AIXBT and Vader. Then last week, we turned our own Professor Fox AI character into an AI agent that's now running and live on X through Virtuals, right? So you can find this AI agent here, right, on X. However, so far his posts have been a bit hit or miss, right? Some good, but most not so good. As you can see, an example here below, crypto's biggest challenge 2025, not very useful. Crypto 2025 quiz, that doesn't mean anything. Our interactive crypto ebook, there is no interactive crypto ebook. So yeah, this week I decided to dive into Virtual's game framework and system to make him better, right? As I said at the top, this is not a beginner topic, but the overarching idea should be reasonable for even non-technical people to follow, right? Before I carry on, I just wanted to say that if you want to set up your first crypto wallet so that you can take part in the growing global crypto AI agent economy, plus access over $1,900 worth of courses entirely for free, then click in the link in the description below. Now, Virtuals has this system, GAME or GAME, that stands for Generative Autonomous Multimodal Entities, which has different modules that allow their AI agents to do key things like perception, learning, planning, and taking action. For the more technically minded, you can find the code in the GitHub here. Both of these links are available in the post, right? You can see the code and you can see the SDK here. And the diagram above, this diagram, describes the full game system. Although it's a little complex to follow, you don't really need to understand it. The key thing to grasp here is that Virtuals have already built their own system to run an AI agent called Game, and so you don't have to, right? You can just make use of it. Every agent that's launched on Virtuals can configure their settings through an interface and use the Game sandbox that looks like this. And we'll get there. Let's go to there now. So this is my agent, the Professor Fox agent. We can click on configure on X, and then you just head down to the bottom, configure in sandbox, and there we go. This is essentially a no-code interface, so you don't deal with code here, that allows you to build your agent on top of Game in a relatively simple and user-friendly way. So you don't have to write any code or do any of that, right? And the system works something like this. Now, this diagram is worth just looking at real quick. It's, the system's broken down into a high-level planner and a low-level planner. And there's configurable components that get fed into these planners that give you the outcome, right? It's a simple enough diagram, but as we go along, you'll see below the configurable components that we discussed that I'm talking about here, right? The Virtuals team have created documentation and videos that teach you how to use this game interface, but you don't need to go through that because that's what this video is for. I've already gone through it myself, and you just need to follow along. Oh yeah, do take note that this framework and interface and this whole system is constantly improving, and some of these things may have changed by the time you read this post or watch this video. So the first section, right, is for the profile. And then we have a subsection within the section, which is the goal and description. The goal in particular defines what the agent wants to achieve and drives the agent's high-level planner system to create outputs. Now, originally with Professor Fox in the previous week, in the previous video, I just set it to simply say educate beginners about crypto. However, the Virtuals team recommends using numbering to define several priorities so you can rank different goals in terms of importance. And they also suggest giving a slight description below the goal. So for Professor Fox, I updated it with the following, which you can see here. Right. Now, I'm not going to read through all of these whenever they come because that would take too long. But you can always pause the video and take a look or read the post. And the key thing here is we have one, this is the highest priority, this is the second highest priority, and this is the third priority, right? And essentially, it's just an expansion on the idea of educating beginners about crypto, but it's got more detail, right? If you're creating an agent yourself, then use the format above as an example and inspiration for your own goals. Next, for the description, think of this as the agent's character. This section defines their personality, and the Virtuals team say that it's ideal to include things like tweeting style and conversation style. So once again, I'm not going to read through the whole thing because that would just take too long. You can pause the video, but essentially, that's this section here, and it just says, Professor Fox knows everything about crypto. But he's also fun and lighthearted, and he's the kind of professor everyone would like to learn from. Feel free to pause and read specifically what I wrote here. You see, the description is not too long, but now Professor Fox has a much clearer personality type and clear goals. It's already much better than what we had before, which was literally nothing. So the next section is called knowledge. And here we have data sets where important thing to note is that previously there was a section here called world information, but the Virtuals team saw that people were prompting very similar things in here to the description, so they removed it and just re-added this old section that they'd taken away called knowledge, where you can upload any data that the agent should know about. So you would just press the upload data assets button here, and Game will store the data in their database, right? They accept PDFs, TXTs, CSVs, HTMLs, and XLSX files, and these data sets get used when the agent generates a reply or posts a message, right? I firstly uploaded the Bitcoin white paper from where this space all began, and then uploaded a single HTML file with all my previous blog posts, like this one, in hopes it would influence Professor Fox to use a similar style to my own. I did this as a single file, as you can see here, and you can see here, just because when I was trying to do multiple files, it was giving errors, and so I just collapsed it into a single file. And when you're ready to go, you just select enable on each of these, and you're good. Cool. Let's look at the next configurable section. So that is called game setup, and it has 3 subsections: heartbeat, workers, and SDK API access. Heartbeat is the most important thing to look at here, and essentially defines the frequency with which your agent takes an action. So there's 2 types of action: general and reply tweets. General sets the frequency of taking an action, where possible actions are shown in the configure section below. So that's this, the functions you can actually do. We'll get to that in a sec. And you can think of it as being a new action scheduled every n minutes. The default for this is 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, the agent will take a new action. If you're using X's free API tier, which Professor Fox currently is, I don't recommend increasing the frequency to be any higher than 15 minutes because X could rate limit you, which just basically means block you from posting too frequently. If you're paying for API access though, then feel free to increase it as much as you like. And reply tweets, on the other hand, is running every 5 minutes. But that's not necessarily a problem because it'll do nothing if there aren't any new tweets to reply to. So 5 minutes is okay. It's an okay frequency. Now, the subsection here, workers, is something that actually feeds into the replying tweets it basically sets the rules by which replies are filtered by. So you can see here, like, process incoming tweet, ignore if it's boring and unimportant. If the replies in total to this thread is too high, then just ignore the conversation. So yeah. And finally, the SDK and API access, you can just totally ignore this. If you followed the instructions in the previous post, then this will be done, and you shouldn't really need to mess with this. Cool. The next configurable section is called X setup. Now, this is where we start to configure the low-level planning components, right? We're mostly on the high level so far. Now we get into the low level. Here we impact how X prompts themselves get generated. And this section has these three subsections: tweet enrichment, browsing lists, and XAPI credentials. The most important thing here is the tweet enrichment. So if we were to click here, you see there's a lot going on. First of all, the recommended system is this one, which allows all of these configurations below to actually work. If you don't need any of that, you can click on this option, which basically just spits out what comes from the game system. But virtuals do recommend giving you the flexibility to change these things. I mean, you don't have to change anything, right? You can see the defaults here below. So this is kind of where the agent, the model, actually decides what it's going to do. For example, it says you're role playing as an agent. This in this case would be Professor Fox. Do not break out of character. Then it takes the character description, which we wrote in the high level in the previous section, right? The goal, which we also wrote in the previous section. World info, as I said, that's been removed. Knowledge, that's the data sets that we covered. And post history, you can see if what you're, the agent can see if the model can see if what the agent's going to create is repetitive in comparison to previous posts that it's created, right? Quite honestly, the virtuals team have already played around with this a lot, and I don't think there's any real reason to change any of the defaults here, but it's good to understand how it works, right? There's probably a larger risk of making the post worse if you do change it. I mean, you can change it, but be warned. I don't recommend changing it, and I didn't change it. Now, if you scroll down further, you can see a section called response configuration, and this is split into post and reply, right? Now, a similar format here, this is the prompt that the model will actually get. This is the model that's set right now. It's Meta's Llama 3.1. You can't alter that. Maybe you will in the future, but it's interesting to note that that's the model getting used. It's not like ChatGPT or Claude or something else. And once again, I don't think you should alter any of the prompts here. I don't recommend altering this or this, because this is what the virtuals team have already worked hard to figure out, get those kind of prompts right, engineer those prompts. But you do get to see these four variables that impact the output. So there's temperature, top K, top P, and repetition penalty, right? Temperature affects the randomness of the output. Higher number means more random. Top K is the number of previous words the model considers when generating the next word. So how much kind of reasoning goes into the actual message that gets generated. Top P is about diversity, how diverse the outputs are. A higher number is more diverse, lower is more repetitive, and repetition penalty is the penalty for repeating posts, like posting the same thing again. Some agents probably want to keep repeating similar things, and others probably want to be a bit more creative, right? So you can play around with those. I actually didn't play around with them either. I left everything as default, but you can see there's a different settings for reply and post, right? They've been slightly tweaked by default. Now, the final thing here in the tweet enrichment whole section is the response generation, right? So this is really important. It essentially, all the replies, you can add up to 5 different possible lengths for the output generated, right? If you don't add anything here, then it will not generate any outputs. But it eventually chooses one out of these 5, right? So you must do it for both posts and reply, because if you don't, then there's none for the agent to pick out of, right? And you can set things like, 10 words, 80 words. So the agent will create 5 different potential outputs, and it will select one of these 5. One of the outputs will be 10 words, up to 10 words, or 20 words, 40 words, etc. Right? But like I say, this needs to be done on both post and reply. These are different sections, right? And if you don't do anything for here, then the agent will not respond, and you'll find yourself a little bit confused about why it's not responding. Cool. So that's really, really a good look there. There's also a section called Browsing List here, which is just dedicated to adding accounts from X for the agent to follow and learn from. As a test, I just threw in Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum, and AXBT agent, which is the main agent that everyone's, the biggest agent of the moment, right? So this means that my agent will search and interact with these users on X as well. So to finish this section real quick, there's the X API credentials. Just like SDK API access, you shouldn't need to change this. This was set in the previous post, and if you set it up correctly, you don't need to alter it. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is just selecting what type of functions the agent can actually do, which appear in the configure function for simulation piece, right? In my specific case, I've unticked wait and like tweet, and anything unticked will not be an action it can perform, right? So all the ticked ones it can perform, the unticked ones it can't. At that interval, that heartbeat interval of every 15 minutes. I don't think that wait and like are particularly useful for an agent that's not actually tweeting that often. I'd rather he tweeted more often, did more interesting tweets, so I removed those. And the function getInfo I also removed, which seemed kind of useless for Professor Fox too, because it is a function purely for the sake of figuring out your own token price, and that doesn't seem very useful for the mission or the goal of this agent, which is to educate beginners about crypto. It's just kind of a wasted use of an action. The rest are all pretty self-explanatory, and I decided to leave them on. Posting, replying, quoting, retweeting, searching the internet for new information, browsing from that browsing list from before, and searching tweets by specific people. Now, we'll also leave this custom function out, perhaps for a future post, as it's another level of complexity which isn't really needed to get a solid agent going. Finally, with all these configurations set, we're ready to get our agent deployed. So after configuring all these settings above in the sandbox, you can hit the export agent button here, which will generate a JSON file that essentially stores all the data that we've written so far. Plus, you can also import into JSON file if you import an agent, if you already had a JSON file that you created previously or someone else created, and you'll overwrite everything in the sandbox, right? It just makes it easier to transfer the data that you've saved into the sandbox. If you've changed too many things, you can also reset the sandbox with this button here, and that will throw everything away, and you'll go back to the last state of the agent that you deployed it. Right. If you select simulate, I won't do it now because it takes a little while to do, but you can see what it looks like here in the post. You'll get an example of the output that the agent will actually create when it's running. So these look a little something like this, right? You get the initial request, the initial response, tweet content, feedback request, and feedback response. There's a feedback loop in the way these agents work, right? A request gets sent to the model to say, what's the next post I should make at that heartbeat interval, and then it makes a decision, what type of decision it's going to make. In this case, one of the specific ideas was it could be posting a tweet and introducing, just the tweet saying, introducing myself and my mission as Professor Fox. That's the reasoning. And then the tweet saying something like, hello, I'm Professor Fox, your go-to expert for all things crypto, blah, 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 blah. It generates several examples like this and then makes a decision, and that's what's in the tweet content. And afterwards, it looks at that decision, and this feedback loop gets used in the next decision. So the agent is evolving, right? It's kind of aware to a certain extent of what's happened in the past, which is really cool, right? Yeah. Now, once you've run a couple of simulations and it all seems okay and you're happy and ready to go, then you just hit deploy here. Now, that'll give you the option to deploy and which process, and once it's gone through, success. Great, so those variables get saved into the agent. And you can go in here in the live version button here to just make sure that those variables are indeed what you expect them to be. So look, agent goal, just as we expected, description, just as we expected, data set, just as we expected, and so on. So the live game live just shows that what the variables are that will impact your agent, what they've been set to. We can go back to the sandbox at any time to alter them, as we have been doing. Awesome. So first of all, we covered a lot. So if any of this doesn't make any sense, then feel free to reach out to me in my community or on X or whatever, or jump into the Virtuals Discord community, as their team are very helpful and they've helped me along the way too. After doing all these changes above, I had a play with Professor Fox and saw some big improvement in him already. For example, we had this conversation. I will just show you. Should be somewhere. If I scroll down, here we go. You know, I asked, what it tweeted, want to learn more about Bitcoin and crypto? I'm here to help. Ask me your questions, and I'll respond with helpful answers and insights. And so I just testing it out, said, why should people buy Bitcoin? And he said, with its scarcity and security features, Bitcoin provides a unique opportunity for individuals to protect their wealth and secure their financial future, especially in times of economic uncertainty, which is a really good answer. That's awesome. How do you recommend you come a start? Then it figured out that my profile says I'm a developer. And it said, as a developer, you may find online courses and tutorials on Web3 and development particularly useful. Some popular resources include development platforms, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, great, do you have any specific resources you recommend? And then it messed up. It said, check out my website. I was like, well, do you have a website? What's the link? My website is currently under development. There isn't a website. But maybe that's the next thing that Professor Fox should have, his own website. But it's, a much better improvement on what the sort of tweets it was already doing before. And this is, Professor Fox has only been around for 2 weeks. This is just a start. I'll undoubtedly tweak the settings above further and further, and I recommend you do the same with your own agent too if you're creating an agent. As a final note, remember that you can find Professor Fox on X at x.com Professor Fox AI. And if you want to buy his token, you can also open up this post and find it here. It's this, we had it here a while back. It's on Virtuals, right? Now, please don't risk more than you can afford to lose. There's no certainty of what will happen to the price of the Professor Fox's token. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it will evolve next and what AI agents other people might make from this tutorial. And just to finish, if you want to, as I said from the top, if you want to set up your first crypto wallet so you can take part in the growing global crypto AI agent economy, plus access over $1,900 worth of courses entirely for free, then click the link in the description below and I will catch you over there.